Welcome to Café con Tampa Online. I'm going to hand off to Del Acosta to introduce our guest.
Good morning, everyone, and happy to have you again with us this morning. Our speaker today is JoAnn Urofsky. She is with the General Manager of WUSF Public Media. That includes WUSF and WSMR, among other things. JoAnn, tell us about the two major stations and then all your podcasts.
Oh, so Del, thanks for the introduction. The two stations are WUSF 89.7, which is our news and jazz station. And we also have WSMR, which is based in, actually the transmitter is in Nokomis on 89.1, and we have a translator in Tampa at 103.9. So you can hear these stations not just over the air, but also streaming on your computer or on our app, which of course is free. In addition to the two stations, we're putting out a lot of our news and information on our websites. Last year at this time, we launched 3 brand new websites. So we have a total of 6 websites with news, information, and our podcast, the Zest podcast. And we're seeing a lot of growth on those websites especially. And we put a lot of effort into the websites especially and our social media because we know that audiences transitioning from broadcast to online, especially during this time of remote work, work from home during coronavirus.
JoAnn, let me ask you, when I do my morning walk, I listen to your app. How is the listenership of that? Is that skyrocketing now during this time? How's it doing?
Yeah, we have a lot of listening on the app, and because people just aren't in their cars. And most of us listen to radio in the car when we're going to work, when we're coming home from work, if you're going to meetings throughout the day. And so as people have stopped going into work since the middle of March, radio listening has really taken a hit in some ways. And what we've seen is that the people that are sticking with radio are the people who absolutely love WUSF and WSMR. In fact, they're listening much more than they used to. The people who would tune in from time to time, they're tuning in from time to time, but a little less. So the people listening now really love the stations.
It's probably strange for people who listen to you on air, especially during the fundraising campaigns, because they hear your voice and now they get to see your face. Tell us about, in case people don't know, about the formats of the two radio stations and how they're different.
So I will. So WUSF 89.7 is NPR news, local news from our reporters here in Tampa and Sarasota, and jazz at night from 9 till 5 in the morning, the other 9 to 5. And we have about 16 people in our newsroom, and they are contributing all day long to daily newscasts. We have about 16 newscasts a day that we do here in Tampa, in addition to what you hear from NPR. We have a reporter based in Sarasota and Manatee counties, and another reporter who lives there, so they're reporting from that area as well. So we're getting great coverage of our entire broadcast footprint area. And our job is to serve people in this area. And that's why having reporters down there is so important. The classical station, WSMR, is all classical music all the time, which is pretty unusual for a market of our size. The biggest markets of New York and Boston and Los Angeles, they have full-time classical stations. And so I think we're really fortunate to have the support to bring a full-time classical station to our part of the world.
Just a public service announcement for people who are used to Café con Tampa. You're welcome to ask questions. If you're watching on the app, just post it underneath the feed. If you're looking on your PC, post it to the right. And also, we do this as a public service. We want to bring access to information like this to as many people in the public as possible. So please hit the share button and share it with your colleagues. Or if you watch it later on YouTube, please subscribe and also share that. JoAnn, tell us about the partnership you all had with the orchestra. That was a very unique situation in this COVID-19 environment.
It was one of the really special things that happened during this period of time. We have broadcast the Florida Orchestra Masterworks concerts for a while now. And then and also the Sarasota Orchestra Masterworks concerts. And then all of a sudden, nobody was performing live anymore. So both orchestras gave us permission to put their symphonies, their concerts online. So we would broadcast them, Sarasota Tuesday nights, Florida Orchestra on Thursday nights. We would broadcast the concerts, then we'd have them online and they were accessible for download. Over 5,700 people so far have downloaded orchestra performances to listen to in their home. And when you think about how many people that would be in an orchestra hall, that's pretty amazing. It's filling up the hall several times over in a time when people couldn't get out and do anything. Classical music especially has been quite a respite for people. This is, I think we can't overestimate enough how stressful a period of time this has been. And people were really looking for a place of refuge, and classical music provides that. And we were really happy to have these great partnerships where the Florida Orchestra was terrific at promoting what was happening and driving people to our website. And we were promoting back to them as well, because they were doing additional things on their site with orchestra members performing in their homes and bringing that all together online.
We have such a great orchestra, and I know they were appreciative of that partnership because of the way they were promoting it all over the place. So in this era of COVID-19, you're on the news side, WSF, you have been generating lots of content. It must have stretched your reporters thin, but you all have been providing great information on it. Can you give us a little insight into that?
Yeah, it stretched them thin indeed. There was so much going on, particularly initially, that you almost don't know where to stop, where to pull the line and say, we just can't cover that thing, because there was so much important information that we thought needed to get to the public. So they have really kicked it in. Our Health News Florida website has been a great place to find information about COVID-19. And of course, we have dedicated spots on our websites where you can find out all you need to know about coronavirus. But when you have a dedicated health newsletter like Health News Florida, that became a place instantly where all of that information was sent out every single day to subscribers. And it has its own site where you can log into Health News Florida and read what's happening in the daily information. So that was really important for us. We were in the process of putting together a project with WMFE, the public radio station in Orlando, called I4Votes. And I4Votes was exactly what it sounds like. We really wanted to bring the voices of people who live between basically Tampa, Sarasota, Daytona Beach, Orlando, onto the air so that we could hear what people were thinking. Well, all of a sudden, in the middle of March, nobody was thinking about a national election. Everybody was thinking about coronavirus. And in this project, instead of focusing on the election, we started focusing on coronavirus. And the show is called The State We're In. It's a Facebook Live show, Tuesdays at noon. You can always go on our YouTube site and watch past episodes. And they've dealt with a lot of information about what's happening locally along either in Orlando, mostly in Orlando and Tampa, about what people are doing. And now, of course, that we've had the protests that recently regarding George Floyd and others' deaths, we've started focusing on that. So we've been able to take this great partnership across the state and really talk to people and get different voices on the air. And that's tremendously important to us. Actually get them on Facebook Live. Sometimes we'll take out clips from what we've heard and put them on the air, but it's mostly a Facebook Live show so that we can reach different audiences.
JoAnn, we have our first question from the floor. Have you needed to change your methods of fundraising? I think you're in a fundraising drive now, right?
We are. We just started fundraising on Tuesday on WSMR, and we'll start fundraising on WUSF in another week or so. We skipped our spring campaigns. Fortunately, the people who were sponsors of our event Longest Table, which is held in April, of course, had to be canceled. And many of them, about 2/3 of them, generously donated their sponsorship for that event to the station. So we're still behind in fundraising. There's no question about that, but we are hoping to regain some footing with these campaigns now. We've been doing some surveying to find out what do people really want to know? What do they want to hear? Are they ready to hear fundraising? And back in April, people were saying, yeah, we're not ready to hear fundraising. But by May, people were saying a little bit more, yeah, we could be ready to hear fundraising. So we're doing all of this remotely because our staff is still by and large remote. Out of 90 people, we have on any given day between 8 and 12 people in the building. Just a fraction, mere fraction of what we normally have. And our broadcasters are working from home. There's one final day for each station that will be live, and mostly live, I should say. It'll be live from some people at home and live from just a few people at the station. You know, we're concerned about set up so that everybody is spread out pretty far apart. We have other producers behind glass walls and in production studios, and they'll be helping. But we've been able to pull this off so far by keeping everybody distant.
JoAnn, just give us a little bit more information on how you fund the entire operation and how people can give. Give a shout out on giving. I've got my solicitation letter right in front of me right now for WSMR, and I'm going to make it seriously next time I write checks. But I know you have a number of methods. Let us know what they are.
Well, we do. The easiest way for so many people is to just go online to WUSF.org or to WSMR.org, and there's a big red donate button, and just go to the donate button and make your gift there. Sustainers, the people who give monthly, are really the lifeblood of the stations. Those gifts have come in every month like clockwork, and they have really, you know, the word sustainer has truly exemplified what these gifts do for us, especially during a time like this when people who would normally be clients on the station are pulling back a little bit. We rely on the community for over 80% of the support to fund the stations. And the rest of the funding comes, we get about $100,000 a year from the state of Florida. We get some funding that is about 9% of our budget from the University of South Florida. And we have funds from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Fortunately, in this time, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting got some CARES Act funding, which gave WUSF $75,000. And it was a great shot in the arm to get that. Covered a little bit of our expenses, you know, for an $11 million budget. That doesn't go far, but we were still grateful to have that. And those are our major outside funders. We have generous support from local foundations and from many donors who give very generously every single year, for which we're very grateful. But the easiest way for most people is just to go online at WUSF.org, WSMR.org.
Very good. In another vein, tell us a little bit about the ZEST podcast. The ZEST,
yeah. The ZEST podcast started about a year ago. We kicked it off when we kicked off the 2019 Longest Table. It's a podcast about food and culture in Florida and the Southeast. And we're in our second season. Every week, a new edition drops on Thursdays. And the producer is Robin Sussingham and Delia Colon. And they have been terrific at keeping us up to date. Especially now, they've turned their eye to what's happening right now with restaurants and things. One of our big successes last year was a whole series they did on bees. And we had a live event at Sweetwater Organic Farms where we had about 100 people come and hear people do presentations on bees and what was happening with the ecosystem of bees. We talked about honey, we talked about honey mead, and had tastings of honey mead. So every week on the ZEST podcast, you can hear from somebody different. One of the recent ones I heard was with the owner of Taco Bus, who is now onto new adventures in a food hall in Orlando. And coming up this week, we have, it's about the owner of Mykonos Restaurant, which is one of my favorites in Tarpon Springs. So that'll be a fun one. I can't wait to listen. And that dropped last night.
JoAnn, let me get a little ad first. Anybody who's just signed on, Café con Tampa style, if you want to ask a question, you can post underneath the post if you're watching on your phone, or to the right if you're looking at your PC. And also, because we provide this information to try to give access to people as broadly as possible, please be sure to share it. JoAnn, your organization and you personally are involved in just about every arts organization in the region. Can you list just some of them? I mean, we've done other shows to talk about the importance of the arts, and you can talk about that, but you all really are some of the connectivity and promotion of the arts in our community.
We are, and you know, for better or worse, our partnerships with the arts organizations, they've had, because they're not doing performances, they're really pulling back on their promotions that go on our air, our nonprofit announcements. So we've taken a bit of hit of that, but we're still looking for ways to be even better partners during this time. And I was just brainstorming yesterday with our director of community partnerships, where do we go? You know, are arts organizations still going to be performing live with a full hall, with a partial hall? Will there be a virtual component that we can help promote and support? We have dedicated our events pages on our websites to all the places you can see virtual performances and art openings and things like that. So that's been really important to us, just to keep putting that information out there, because people are looking for ways, while they are not going out as much, to find ways to not just entertain themselves, but educate themselves. So any arts organizations we've been part of, you know, that have virtual exhibits going on, we've been able to partner with that. Most of our arts organizations that we partner with many are in Sarasota, where we have 65 arts partnerships with everything from churches who bring in concerts to the Sarasota Orchestra, the ballet, the St. Pete Opera, and opera here in Tampa as well. So we're all missing the live performances and trying to find out how art survives if people are not partaking, or if concert halls can only be half full, what that looks like.
The other thing is we're in an election year. You kind of referred to that earlier. So now we just heard last night that the Republican National Convention will be in Jacksonville. I think that was what the announcement was, right? And so how are you gearing up? Are you going to partner with your Jacksonville affiliate? How do you all cover the presidential race?
Well, we're going to, the project formerly known as I4 Votes, that became known as the state we're in once coronavirus hit and the protests began later. We are along the I-4 corridor. We still think that's one of the most valuable things that we can bring, because this is such a swing state, and the I-4 corridor especially is a swing area for voters, and such a determiner of what happens in so many other states in the country. So yes, I imagine the Jacksonville station, which just became All News and Information, they dropped their music and have now put that on a website and stream. I imagine they'll be heavily involved, as WUSF was here in 2012 when we had the Republican National Convention. And we will do all we can to partner with them. Right now, we partner very well with public stations across the state. That's a pretty important part of how we bring you information from all over Florida. There's a show on Fridays that we air called the Florida Roundup. It's at noon every Friday, and it's co-hosted by somebody from WJCT in Jacksonville and someone from WLRN in Miami. And our reporters participate from time to time as they have something to contribute. They show up as a guest on the show. So I'm sure that that partnership is going to be on steroids, especially because the convention is coming up very soon. Usually you prepare for these things a year in advance. So this will be, 2 months in advance? So I'm sure all the news directors across the state are trying to figure out how do we pull this off and make sure people backyard.
JoAnn, what's the challenge that you have in covering local news coverage, especially among the smaller communities in your listening area?
Well, I think that's a great question, Del. And the issue is not enough reporters on the ground. So with more funding, that's what we use our funds for, is to acquire a bigger reporting staff. Last year, we were really fortunate to get funding from the Manatee Community Foundation and several major donors to put a reporter on the ground in Sarasota and Manatee counties. We know there's a ton of stuff going on, and if you're sitting in Tampa, it makes it harder to cover. So having somebody on the ground there has just brought amazing news stories to light. In fact, one that won a Regional Mero Award about a group of women who do competitive dragon boat racing, and they're all breast cancer survivors. On our staff in Sarasota and Manatee counties, if we could put people on the ground in St. Pete, you know, we send people to St. Pete all the time. Crossing the bridge is not an issue, but having people who live there and report from there in Lakeland, which is also part of our coverage area, and even further north in Pasco County, would really help our efforts. So our fundraising and building our budget, which we're in the process of doing right now for the next fiscal year, starting July 1, we're always trying to find the funds to have more reporters on the ground. And now that so much is digital, digital reporters are important to us also.
Did you all see what happened at the St. Pete City Council yesterday? And I think a similar thing happened at Pasco County, where they were Zoom bombed, and apparently people from out of state who are blocking their IP address inserted all kinds of racial slurs. Did you all cover that, JoAnn? Did you all watch that?
I heard that had happened. And don't know if we covered that exactly or not. I looked at the rundown and I'm not sure I remember that I saw that or not.
A crazy thing. I mean, we see that, who knows, somebody could Zoom bomb us, I guess, too, although we try to keep this private. Here's a question from the floor. To help supporters spread the news about the importance of supporting public radio, is there a post that can be shared with the public, with others? How could people who are interested in supporting public radio, and really it's local news, right? I mean, we're in this time, even before COVID-19 hit, we're in a fight to try to preserve and save our local news sources of all kinds. Can you tell us what folks can do to support it?
For WUSF and WSMR specifically, we have lots of social media posts going out. And I would encourage you to follow us on social media and at WUSF Public Media or WSMR or WUSF, and share the posts. We're in fundraising right now, and a lot of those posts will be about fundraising. So if you could just do a share, that would respond to things that you put out on our behalf.
What do you see? You've been involved with WSF for a long time. There's a lot of unusual things happening right now, but what do you see as some of the political trends, setting aside the big events happening right now? What are some trends that you're observing and covering?
You know, I think for us, it's going to be continuing to focus on the voices of people in the community. We've launched a new little project called Postcards. And the postcards, there's a spot on our WUSF.org website where we want to talk to people who've been involved in the protests. We want to hear their voices. We want to hear what motivates them. We want to hear about their experiences. So for us, it's really going to be finding new audiences that might not typically be listening to radio, because younger people are typically not big radio listeners, but who are out online and who can respond digitally where they're much more comfortable. And we're asking them to get in touch with us and let us hear, because so that's a big effort that we're engaged in right now. The other is more collaborative reporting with other news organizations. Our Health News Florida newsletter is done in collaboration with WMFE in Orlando and WLRN in Miami. We've done several journalism efforts that have included other stations across the state. And that's important to us because it really increases our capacity. It leverages the ability of reporters in different areas to come together on different trends in what's happening in the community and report on them, so that you know what's happening in one location is also happening somewhere else.
JoAnn, I have a question from the
Yeah.
floor. It says, it's a long question. Local stations like WBUR, WAMU, WHYY, and others are responsible for producing daily programming that plays such a critical role in the content and varied perception of public radio nationally. It certainly must be costly to maintain such endeavors, but it also must benefit the stations where they wouldn't be doing it. Given the national interest in Florida, both good and bad, do you foresee the day when WSF might produce a program heard nationally? What challenges would that entail?
That's a great question. And it's something we think about all the time. And it's something we have a plan for. It's something we just haven't had the funding for. Because to be able to launch something like that, we would need to bring on a staff of 4 people, which would include a co-host, a producer, 2 producers, and another reporter, so that we could make sure that we're getting the quality that we need on the air. And so we're not just talking about putting more feet on the ground in Lakeland, we're talking about a crew of 4 people that we would need to bring on. So we've been talking to donors about things like that, and people are interested. We hope it's just a matter of time before we can raise the money to do something like that, because we would very much like to be in the lead on that. And we had it in our budget for this year. I think if we had not had coronavirus, we would have been seeing something by now. Now it's in the budget for this coming year, and hopefully we'll be able to get there with your help.
Del, do you have a final question?
Well, I think WUSF and WSMR are true assets to our community. Other than, and it's very important, I shouldn't put it this way, contributing to the station, what else can we do as a community to support public radio?
I think spreading the word is huge. The more ambassadors we have, the more people know about us. Your social networks, whether it's one-to-one, and just talking about the station and what you heard today that made a difference for you, or social media networks. They're very valuable to letting people know that we're out there, we're covering the things we're interested in. The other thing is by contacting us, letting us know what's happening in the community, because you all know things that we might not necessarily know, and you might know it before we know it. And having that information about new trends, new things that are going on is incredibly valuable to our news staff. And contacting us online is always the best way at WUSF.org, and letting us know these trends before we do is worth a lot to us, because we want to bring that to everybody, that information.
JoAnn, you're also, personally involved in a lot of things. And one of them that I know you're involved in is Athena. And I think you've been involved in League of Women Voters before. We see in Tampa in particular, the emergence of very powerful female leaders. We've got a female mayor now, who I think is our 3rd. By the way, for anybody who doesn't know, the president of Café on Tampa is female, PJ Somerville. She doesn't want to be on these videos, but if you go in person, you'll see her every week. But what else do we need to do to support making sure that our smart and capable female leaders, have a seat at the table?
I think that's kind of the conversation that we're having right now with Black Lives Matter, is making sure that all kinds of people, and Black people and women, have a seat at the table. And I think we all have to be just very conscious of what's going on in the community and the valuable voices that might not be at the table. We're, as part of the University of South Florida, it goes without saying, we have a very diverse place to work in, but it could be more so. So hiring people that bring diversity to what you do is incredibly important. Always has been for us, and it's something we continue to pursue. And women are, of course, have a voice, and it's important to be promoted.
JoAnn, thank you so much for coming on board today. Any final thoughts and words? And please give us your website so that we all know where to go.
Well, the website, go to WUSF.org, and please show your contribution during this time that we're fundraising. WSMR.org is our classical station. We're so grateful for the support of the community. As I said earlier, 80% of our funds come from people in the community, and we know you're real people. Just a brief story. I go in on Tuesdays and open the mail to keep our processes straight. And it's an odd thing to do, but it's actually a joy, because I get to see some of the letters that our donors write, And they're incredible letters about how much they rely on the services we provide. And we're so grateful to be able to do that for this community. That's what we exist for. So thank you for your support, your financial support, for listening and looking online and sharing our stories.
And we mentioned this a couple of times, but you have the websites that people can go to. You have the radio stations.
Yeah.
And then you have the podcast. Tell us the names of the podcasts again.
The Zest podcast, also Florida Matters, is available as a stream. You can stream the stations on your computer, or you can get the free app from the App Store or Google Play. Yeah,
and when I mentioned I use the app every day when I'm doing my morning walk, and so everybody don't forget that. In the old days, we would carry like a Walkman radio, and then it went to other forms. But we need to remember we can still get access to that kind of content. But also don't forget on the app to hit the notification button so that the information pops up. And the same thing with the podcast. All right, anything else, JoAnn?
No, I really appreciate being here, and I hope we all get through this period of time and can come back together and meet in person soon.
Yes, when we start having in-person meetings, come back to the Oxford Exchange or wherever we are. And one thing, I've spent much time in parking lots finishing up a program on WUSF. A tremendous community asset. That's where I really learn a lot.
And also, if anybody wants to meet JoAnn, she's a regular at our in-person meetings too. So thank you all for coming, and your news team covers us a lot too. So thank you for that. All right. Thanks everybody for watching. Be sure to share the content on your Facebook page or other places, and look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.